So there is a lot of confusion about whether or not a dismissive avoidant is also a narcissist. And they're called a lot of other things. Maybe they're being called commitment phobic or emotionally abusive or all these terms, and it creates a lot of confusion about what's actually going on and what to do about it. And the reality is all you know is your experience of either being someone who's avoidant or being with someone who is avoidant or has some of these other quality traits. And because of that, you see the world through your own lens. So today I want to give you some clarity, and I've personally met and spoken to some of the nation's top experts in this, and there's a big difference between the true full-blown narcissist and the truly avoidant attachment style. But there is a little overlap in a couple areas that make it confusing. So I want to give you some clarity on that. So for those of you who are new to my channel, I'm Ketra Thompson. I'm a certified master hypnotist and a relationship recovery coach. So I help my clients get to the heart of what's going on a subconscious level so they can reframe those beliefs that are driving their unwanted behavior, helping them to create the life and the love that they want. If you'd like to learn more, in the description below, there's a link to my website where you can learn more and a link where you can set up a completely complimentary consultation call so that we can get to the heart of what's going on with you and I can give you my best recommendation and hopefully get you a lot more clarity. So first of all, I want to look at this entire issue as a spectrum. Narcissism exists on a spectrum, and so does avoidant attachment style. So there are different levels of intensity that are present with each person depending on what kind of trauma they went through or what their life experiences were and what coping mechanisms they put in place to deal with that. So first, because this exists on a spectrum, I want to look at some specific traits of the narcissist. Now, the narcissist has a sense of entitlement. They have a grandiose feeling about themselves. They're so deserving. They really lack empathy. They not only can't see it from someone else's point of view, but really refuse to even try to see things from someone else's point of view or to understand how their actions impact someone else. They're oftentimes attention seeking. They like to be the center of attention. Even if it's negative attention that they're getting, they just want attention continuously, like a bottomless pit of attention seeking. They can be very manipulative. They often will bully, they're controlling, they're demanding, it's their way or no way at all. They take advantage of others often. They will manipulate situations to their benefit even if it hurts other people. So they don't really have an ethical moral compass. They have this push and pull dynamic where they pull their partner in because they want closeness and connection, and then they push them out. They pick a fight over something that is not important at all so they can create distance. And this dynamic, the push-pull dynamic, is what gets confused for the avoidant part of them, right? Because they push their partner away and they create distance by picking a fight or creating some kind of tension in some kind of way or ignoring them or withholding or whatever. And so it gets very confusing because distance making is something that an avoidant partner tends to do. And so I want you to see this as the fact that a narcissist is actually also avoidant and anxiously attached. So they have a mixed attachment style. It's also called a chaotic attachment style or very disorganized attachment style because sometimes they are wanting to create closeness and then their fear of that vulnerability and closeness causes them to create distance as well. So that's where the confusion is. So let's take a look at what I really like to call the ethical avoidant. And I think that was a phrase that I heard the first time from Adam Lane Smith. And I think it's brilliant because the dismissive avoidant doesn't always fit the description of the type of avoidant attachment style that is truly a part of a good person's dynamic. So let's look at what that kind of entails for the ethical avoidant person. They would never want to hurt someone. They avoid making promises to avoid letting people down because they don't want to feel the shame or the guilt of letting someone down. So they hold back on that kind of commitment level. They want to do the right thing, and they want to protect themselves while also not harming someone else. They're really strong, they're really capable, they're really risk management minded. So they're looking at things with a perspective of problem solving and managing risk. And they also avoid vulnerability through emotional intimacy because of how they grew up. So they do that thing where they sometimes create distance, or they pull away, or they go silent. And the two things between the narcissist and the ethical avoidant, they do cross over. And so sometimes assumptions get made that someone who has some avoidant tendencies but is actually ethically avoidant, maybe they're narcissistic because they're pushing that person away, but they're not. The narcissistic qualities are quite defined, and they really are something that people with that issue, they don't care about hurting other people, but the ethical avoidant does care. So there's a lot of different names for this out there. The commitment phobic person, or other labels, and there is definitely some crossover. And one of the most interesting ones to me, and someone who I have met personally, is Dr. Doug Weiss. He has coined the term intimacy anorexia. And intimacy anorexia consists according to his terms, as someone who is excessively busy. They can't really slow down to connect. They are oftentimes withholding of love and praise. They might say jokey, jab things at you, but they don't necessarily openly praise you as their partner. They are unable to share their feelings. They oftentimes create blame or put the blame on the other person, and they have this ongoing, ungrounded criticism of their partner, a mental dialogue that they are constantly reaffirming in their head, and it comes out of their mouth too. They've got this criticism that keeps coming at their partner. They oftentimes are angry or give the silent treatment. They withhold money sometimes. They can oftentimes feel like a roommate. They're emotionally disconnected, and sometimes they even withhold sex, especially if they want to be in control of the when. So I think it's really interesting that these other labels have gotten put on things that are really defining that crossover part of the narcissistic behavior versus the ethical avoidant behavior. And they've sort of covered both bases a little bit in these labels by including some of the things that a narcissist would do and a lot of the things that an ethical avoidant would do, but they don't necessarily apply to both. Another expert really that I've met and talked to who has said a lot about this is Dr. David Hawkins, and he tends to use the narcissistic term or the emotionally abusive term, because a lot of times this behavior is quite destructive to the person's partner, and the ethical avoidant person won't realize it. They won't know that they're being destructive in their relationship or to their partner, but the narcissistic person may know and just actually doesn't care at all. And so there's a difference between being clueless about not knowing that you're hurting someone and being so self-absorbed that you just don't care. Now, that doesn't mean all clueless behavior is something that, like, there are some clueless behavior that narcissists will do that they don't realize, but oftentimes you can see the difference in a narcissistic person because they won't treat someone else in their world the way that they will treat their spouse, because they know that it has repercussions. They know that they're going to be judged for it. They know that it's harsh or unacceptable behavior, but they'll do it to their spouse anyway. And the ethical avoidant won't do that. They will maybe pull back or create distance where they are at risk for being the most vulnerable, which is with their partner, but they won't necessarily treat their partner in a way that they wouldn't treat someone else in the rest of the world. They have more consistency in that, if that makes sense. So let's look at what the ethical avoidant really is like. They tend to pull away and solve problems on their own. They're very capable, and as an adaptation to how they grew up, they have really tried to stay safe. So they think that solving problems on their own keeps them safe and doesn't put them at risk for criticism, judgment, or being seen as dependent on someone else. So the early stages of a relationship, oftentimes they are more open with their affection, their verbal affection, and their desire to be connected, because there is zero risk of commitment. Everything's new and it's fresh and it's exciting. And so they don't hold back in the same way because the risk factor isn't coming up for them. They aren't feeling the risk yet. And so as the relationship goes on, they end up with real feelings or a real amount of respect or connection with the person that they're with, and then they pull back. And they don't say those things anymore. And they don't want to rely on someone else or put them at risk for being let down by someone else. They also don't want to let down the other person because they want to always have the option to leave or to move the other direction without feeling shame and guilt. And so they create this distance. And oftentimes they'll escape into hyper-focused things, work, hobbies, video games. And you might notice if you bring up a conversation about emotions, or you try to have that talk, they get very shifty. They literally shift in their seat. They get up, they walk to another room, they come back. They're visibly uneasy. And they're probably completely unaware that they're doing it. It's a trained coping mechanism that is a part of trying to keep them safe, that old system of trying to keep them safe, right? They avoid conflict, and sometimes they'll even appease their partner by quickly agreeing, okay, yes, whatever, so they can kind of shut them up and move on, even if they don't really want to do that thing. They'll betray themselves to get out of this situation because their partner's emotions scare them even more than their own emotions do. Their own emotions, and maybe not scared isn't the right word, but it's more like they sometimes don't have access to their emotions, and then they also don't know what to do with them. They've never been taught how to process them, move through them, and handle them, so they try to avoid them. And they especially try to avoid their partner's emotions because, they don't even know what to do with their own. How are they supposed to know what to do with their partners? So this creates a disconnect with their partner, and they are usually just not aware that what they're doing in trying to protect themselves is actually keeping themselves stuck, keeping themselves from having the connection that creates all of the homeostasis in their body that they need to be successful in life and in happiness and to really even affect the calmness of their nervous system. They don't know that they're working against themselves when they do these behaviors. They just know that they're doing it and it feels safe to them. So why are they like this? Why is the avoidant attachment style like this? Well, usually they grew up with a lot of neglect. So they believe subconsciously they can't rely on anyone. And this was their normal. So they think this was normal. When you're young, you don't know that there's another way of being. You don't know there's another way for your parents to be. You just know this is my normal and it hurts. So I'm going to find a way to fix that. And it doesn't mean they were neglected in a way. It may have meant like they didn't have enough food, they didn't have any care, they were really, really harshly neglected. But more likely, they were emotionally neglected. No one was really walking them through their feelings, validating their feelings, helping them feel seen and heard and understood. So they internalize that when they've had these feelings, something must be wrong with them because no one else is agreeing with what they feel. No one else is validating that. And that creates a tremendous amount of shame. So as a child, they're longing for that connection and they're not getting it. And it feels like constant rejection. Now, this can be reinforced if they later in life get into a relationship with someone else who constantly rejects them, which is not uncommon because our subconscious mind works in a tricky way where it looks for what's familiar. And so that can be reinforced over and over with constant rejection from a partner who does not give them the love and validation and support that they truly crave and desire. So they create distance so nobody sees that something might be wrong with them. Because when we're a child and we're creating these belief systems, we don't see things with discernment. We see things very, very naively. So if a child isn't getting their need met, they are going to say, well, I'm the center of the universe. And my universe isn't very big. I only know a few people. And if I can't get my need met, something must be wrong with me. And that belief becomes part of their subconscious programming, driving things they do for the rest of their life. And so if they feel that way, even if they're not aware of the belief, sometimes that belief was created before they had verbal words, before they could even talk. So it's not like it's something that was articulated in words when it was created in their mind. It's a feeling inside of them. Like, I am afraid of the rejection here because something's wrong with me. So I'm going to keep some distance so nobody can see all of me. And so their parents might have even actively shamed their emotions. Like, boys don't cry. Come on, knock it off. Let's keep going, right? And so this can create a lot of shame and a lot of disconnection from themselves on the inside. So this whole concept of holding back and not showing themselves actually relates really well to the research that John Gottman has done on bids. Now, bids are something that everyone does with their parent, their partner, anyone they're connected to, and it's bids for connection. So if one person's looking out the window and says, "Ooh, look at that bird out there, it's super pretty," their partner can do one of three things. And so can parents. Parents can turn toward them or partner and say, "Oh yeah, you're right, that's super cool." Or they can turn against them and say, "Ugh, can't you see I'm in the middle of something? Leave me alone." Or they can say nothing. They can literally not respond, as if that other person doesn't even exist. And what they found in their research is that people with the highest divorce rates and the fastest divorce rates come from the people who have a partner who don't say anything. The second highest are the people who turn against. But it takes longer for those people to leave because negative attention is still some attention. And so they can predict divorce with a huge amount of accuracy. I think 95 to 98% accuracy with all of the research that the Gottmans have done. But what they also found is if someone doesn't respond favorably to your bids for connection, you just stop bidding. That means you stop trying to create connection. And if this is happening to someone in their childhood, this is becoming a part of their subconscious programming in a way that is much different than if it's happening in their adult life. So kids who did not have the validation or the connection when they bidded for attention learned very quickly that I'm either a burden for trying to bid for connection, I'm unwanted, I am rejected, and so much shame is built up, and it creates this dynamic that chooses avoidance as an adult. I could probably talk about this topic all day and unpack all kinds of things that I'm not even going to get close to covering in this video. So I want to move on to what do we do about it. First of all, the hypnotherapy process is the most profound and deep way that you can address these issues, because if you address the triggers underneath the surface, the fears, the concerns, the avoidant parts, the protective parts that are working so hard to keep you safe, but they're actually creating so much distance with the people in your life. Now you can move into a space of real self-worth and confidence, because the hypnotherapy process is the only time that you have access to your subconscious mind. So you can learn all the tools and things to implement, and that's great and it's important, and I teach all of that too, because you can't have one without the other. But those tools feel like you're working against the grain if you don't address the subconscious issues. The subconscious programming is deep. Your subconscious mind controls over 95% of everything you think, feel, and do. So if you try to fight that, it's like trying to stop a freight train. A freight train will plow through a full house and not stop. So it's like an uphill battle. So we need to address those internal belief systems and triggers subconsciously, and then we need to move into the application of connection with other people and proper ways of communicating and boundaries and all of the other stuff, but we really need to address the subconscious stuff first. That's why the hypnotherapy process is different than everything else, specifically the process I do, because it is such a deep root cause process, allowing you to reframe those beliefs where they were created. And that's a really big deal. So let's look at what you can do if you're the partner of the avoidant or you are the avoidant. And let me just state this. If you're with someone who really falls into the narcissistic category, my best advice is to leave. you don't change people like that. They only change when they've truly decided to change, and it's not usually because of your request. People who want to create change will, even if they're a little bit tentative about it. So if you are the partner of an avoidant, you can learn how to speak their language, and you can learn how to play by their rules, because they're playing the game of life by a different set of rules than you are, and they're very practical. And so you want to communicate with very measurable, clear requests. Don't make them read your mind, but you also, before you do that, have to learn how to regulate your own emotions and deal with the emotions that come up in you so that you can create more rapport that will allow them to create more capacity to handle your emotions later. So first, you really have to deal with your own emotional triggers as well. Healing your own attachment style, your own programming, and your own triggers gives you the best ability to now start speaking their language and create the connection you want. And I do all of this with my clients in a very holistic program that covers all of this information. So as the avoidant, you can start expressing your needs and your desires to someone who feels safe. Preferably to your spouse. Hopefully your spouse feels safe. You can also do it with a friend, someone who doesn't hold the same risk level of rejection for you, that you can start practicing with. You can start being curious about other people's perspective instead of assuming that the whole world sees things the way you do, and being open and curious about what if someone experiences life differently than me and views things differently, and you can start asking questions. You can learn to regulate your nervous system so that that overwhelming desire to pull away doesn't overwhelm you in your relationships, so you can move towards someone instead of away from them. And of course, you can get the help to reprogram the subconscious mind so that you can address what's driving that behavior, so you can allow yourself to step into a place that creates the actual connection and support that you want, and where you can communicate your authentic self without feeling like you have to people please or appease people to just do what they want and move on. So you're not avoiding your own feelings in the process. Tuning into yourself is really the key that needs to happen before you tune into other people. You have to know what's going on inside of you. And if you are disconnected from your own feelings, then we have to work on that process of getting you reconnected to what's going on so you can get the right message. So I've said this before and I'll say it again, but your feelings are all good. They're all like the lights on the dashboard of a car. They're all just giving you information. But if you don't know what the information means, you aren't going to be able to satisfy the need. So if the oil light comes on, but all you do is put gas in that car, you're going to burn up the engine. Same thing here. If you don't know how to interpret those feelings because you were never taught, and you have reinforced with probably dysfunctional relationships all of your childhood stuff your whole life, you're really not going to know how. But once you understand what the feelings mean, you can now make an actionable plan to meet those needs, communicate them effectively, and actually get where you want to go. So I do this with my clients every day, and I'm creating an entirely new program that is all about moving in to secure attachment. So if you'd like to learn more, again, set up that consultation call. I'd love to chat with you. And until next time, I hope you curate a life by your own design.